My name's Judd Holroyd. I work for Wells Fargo. I'm the head of global product management, so we look after most of the international space functioning for the bank.
Okay. And as one of the, one of the largest commercial banks in America and globally, what keeps the corporate treasurers up at night?
You know, we're just in a marketplace of rapid change, right? Whether it's economic change, whether it's change with trade partners and geopolitical challenges, you know, I think what most corporate treasurers are looking for is stability and control and visibility, right? And so we really focus on how do we bring that certainty to the uncertain as best we can. And a lot of that just has to do with being diligent and disciplined and consistent, right? Especially in core functions like payments, like information services, where companies, no matter how volatile the marketplace is, they're really reliant on that consistency of information or transaction handling.
So you look after trade, treasury, and I guess payments and cross-border from a product perspective. Are these features interlinked or seen as individual from your customer perspective and also from the business perspective?
You know, I think all the way from an infrastructure through a product to the customer, we're really focused on trying to interlink as much as we can. I think there's verticals where there's a level of specificity and differentiation where we do want independence, certainly. But when we look at things like payments, for example, right, we look at high value, low value, real time, all of that in sort of a contiguous form to make sure that the various use cases for a customer, right? So, you know, paying a rebate to a consumer or paying, you know, a rideshare driver who wants on-demand money on the back of giving somebody a ride is a very different use case than perhaps a corporate that's pre-scheduling payroll payments. But we have to look at them all together, whether they're domestic or cross-border. And that's admittedly challenging for a big bank, right? I think we always have opportunities to improve the customer experience, and we're committed to doing that, and we've got to take a holistic view to do that.
And do you think the big bodies such as Swift, with many of their products, are innovating fast enough to also address that customer challenge?
So, I mean, that's a really good question, right? I think sometimes you hear people refer to Swift as not moving fast enough. I actually think a lot of what encumbers Swift is the traditions of banking and correspondent banking models and the things that have been around, you know, even before the 70s. You know, if you look at Swift's announcement this week around the global payment instant service, I mean, I think that is a big, really important step forward because what the industry is recognizing, you know, consumers and businesses want more access to cross-border near real-time payments, you know, to compete more actively with the third parties. But one of the realities is you really need a network like Swift that has the scale to provide that interconnectivity between something like Swift GPI and a local real-time scheme. So we're very, very bullish on sort of Swift's innovative focus on that cross-connectivity. You know, I think the banks themselves, we all push ourselves to innovate, right? I mean, most of us are big institutions. It takes time, but I really appreciate the partnership with Swift. I really think that they've got sort of an edge view on the future. We just have to now collectively really push forward and execute against it.
Okay, so Judd, let's talk about trade and more specifically trade wars and volatility in the market. And I think generally we've seen trade flows stagnate or even slow down, but actually a lot of reports that we're seeing are seeing that the revenues from trade finance from a lot of the banks have continued to go up. Is this your view, and what are you seeing from the bank's perspective?
So, I mean, there are always going to be periods of sort of trade wars and trade wars and geopolitical challenges, right? Personally, I think trade is going to continue, right, with a good level of momentum. I think the makeup of trade is what's changing. So while you still see the growth, it's some of the maybe more traditional historic mechanisms for trade that have changed. And part of that's just the different dynamics in modern culture. So for example, there are way more person-to-person connections through social media, right, than there ever were. So whether you consider that a trade function, but the movement of money tends to follow those connections. And the more digital connections there are, the more cross-border transactions there are naturally, because I've got more friends overseas. I may be exchanging money or products or what have you with them. So, I mean, I think the globalization that's driven by the digital reality of the world today will keep actually trade moving in a productive direction, albeit a less traditional definition of trade.
Okay, great. So I guess here we are at Cybos. We've seen many innovations in and around AI, machine learning, robotics. It would be good to hear some of the latest fintech inventions coming out of Wells Fargo, more specifically from the corporate side of the business. Can you share anything with us there?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you a real example. We recently did a new product with an Irish company called Transformate, really looking at how do we help our middle market corporates get better efficiency and value in cross-border trade payments, basically. So one of the challenges that our customers face is when they're invoicing in US dollars to a partner in a non-US dollar market, those transactions, as they're facilitated cross-border, often have lifting fees in the traditional makeup of correspondent banking, and wire fees tend to be expensive. And so what we did with Transformate, leveraging their market coverage of about 55 markets, was fabricate a much more local experience for the payer, right, where they're offered a very competitive FX rate. Transformate is then bringing that transaction into their network in partnership with Wells Fargo and moving it to our customer, right, the biller, in a much more efficient form. But most importantly, it foots with the invoice. So the invoiced amount always matches the principal that comes back. That allows a perfect reconcilement. It also, the service also, because it's using local payment models instead of cross-border payment models, reduces the fees on both sides by between 50 and 75%. So the innovation with fintechs to us is really about the customer value, and we always want to be able to measure it. And this was a great example of how you really can use the creativity that a fintech like Transformate brings to the market, and apply it in real terms to a customer value proposition.
That's interesting. Is the bank making less real kind of revenue though as a result of those reduced FX fees?
I mean, I guess you could look at it that way, right? Are we giving something up? Yeah, we're giving something up, but what we're returning is more value to the customer, which is what matters and what we really care about.
Yeah, great. Well, look, Judd, thank you very much for joining us today on Trade Finance Talks, and have a great rest of your week at Cybos.
Appreciate it. Thank you.